Am I live? Did it work? Let's look in the chat. Yes, it looks like it worked. All right. Wow, we're actually live. This is wild. Thank you for coming. My name is Joe Grand, as you probably know from being in this video. This is the first time that I've done any sort of live, ask me anything, AMA, Q&A, all of that stuff. The videos that I make, those are easier because you can edit stuff and put it together. And if I'm on stage answering questions, like that's a little bit different because it's a shorter time. But this is, very exciting. So hopefully this is the first of many, AMA sessions or open lab, if you will. Here's my lab behind you. I do want to say thank you for coming, whether you are watching now, and I'm kind of seeing the chat on the side as we go. I'm not going to be able to answer stuff, obviously, but I have some moderators here that are helping me out and pasting some questions over to me. But yeah, whether you're watching now live or whether you're watching later, thank you. I appreciate it. This is something, a lot of you guys watching the video have emailed me questions, and emails take me forever to answer, as some of you probably realize. So what better way than to, answer questions live and actually be able to interact a little bit. Like, it's pretty cool. Wow. Hi from Colombia, Slovakia, India. This is awesome. Wow. I can't believe it. So thank you for that. I do want to say also, little shout out to some people working behind the scenes. So some of my partners in some of this, it's like a lot of times you see videos and just assume that it's one person making that video, but it's almost never that way. So we have Fred and Freddie and Larry and Dan kind of working behind the scenes, helping with the video production, helping field all of the emails that we're getting, especially because of the wallet hacking video that, came out last month. So it's just been completely chaotic since then. And we have the moderators that are going to try to keep track of things. And, obviously be nice to each other in the chat. I do have slow mode, so it's like every 30 seconds or so you're allowed to type, so you can't spam stuff. Just be nice, and the internet can be a rough place. So hopefully this is a safe space, and we're gonna answer lots of questions and do lots of stuff. Hi from Greece too, in the UK, Africa. Holy moly! Isn't the internet so cool? Thanks for staying up late too. We tried to make the time fit everybody as best as we could. Okay, so I have a whole list of questions that people have emailed me in advance, in case they're not here. And of course, we're going to answer those and intersperse with live stuff as well. I do want to say this video and the chat are going to be available afterwards. I think as soon as I end the video, it's going to show up on YouTube. So if you've missed a question or you want to see what other people have asked, or you come in late or whatever, that's where it's going to be. So Iran, Germany, Iceland, Argentina, Finland. Wow, this is like every place that I want to travel to. Australia, super cool. Denmark, wow. Okay, so let's see. I think, I guess maybe just to give a little background first, because I don't know how many of you have followed my history before the wallet hacking video that came out. But I've been involved in hacking since 1982, when I was a wee little child of 7 years old. And basically I had an older brother and an older sister, and we had an Atari 400 computer that basically was my brother's, and he would collect video games on 5.25-inch floppy disks and trade those with people. And I just gravitated towards that computer and essentially never left. Like, we had a computer room that was the small kind of closet room with a like an old wooden door as our desk, and we had a big TV in the Atari 400. And my brother kind of introduced me to the computers and stuff, and then he decided to go into music and become a musician and all these other things, and left technology. So I was up there pretty much every day after school, every waking hour before school. I would go and use my modem and connect to bulletin board systems and find other ways to trade games with people. And ultimately it was all right, now I need to connect to bulletin board systems outside of my local area. That costs money. So figured out how to make free phone calls to connect to other bulletin board systems, and it just sort of snowballed. And then realized that there was other people that were interested in not only trading games, but having information, say, access to other systems, or different types of ways to get free phone calls, or ways to have giant party lines, alliance teleconferences where you could all gather and talk on the phone, like we're doing, except on the phone. So it was really like a very special time. And for me as a hacker, it really, it was just so normal, right? To like have information that kids, shouldn't normally have. And it was very special. I ended up getting arrested when I was 16 years old, 15 or 16, um, for breaking into a telephone company uh, car lot to steal equipment. And that's been mentioned in a couple places, but it was really a turning point. And the reason I mention it is, first of all, I was super lucky because I was underage. I did not go to jail. Some of the other people was with did go to jail. And we were all part of this hacker group called Renegade Legion. We'd all met up and thought it would be a good idea to meet up in Michigan. And why my parents let me do that, I have no idea. That's a question for another day. But yeah, so, it was a real turning point because I realized I wanted access to information and I wanted to learn stuff, but obviously stealing it from other people, or maybe nowadays you could equate it to like breaking into someone's system, is probably not the right way to go, right? It's only going to lead to bad things. And there really wasn't a career path for hacking. It was sort of like we loved doing it because of just that passion and that curiosity for technology. And that was the goal. So after getting in trouble, I realized, all right, I got to do something that's going to keep me out of trouble, but still, again, being in love with technology. I ended up joining a hacker group called The Loft, which was one of the first publicly facing hacker groups. And those guys were all older than me. So really it was a place, for me to learn how to properly convey information to people. And we would hack on our own systems and find vulnerabilities in stuff that we're running on our own networks. And then essentially, contact the vendors. Early on, it was mostly Microsoft. And it was like, hey, we found a problem in your, in your landman hashing system. Like, here's how you should fix it. And a lot of times they would blow that off and not do anything. And we would release stuff to the public. But I really learned a lot about the importance of sharing information and doing things for good and really spreading that good side of the hacker message. And that's why that turning point was important. So basically, since then, I've been doing a lot of engineering work because I am formally trained as a computer engineer. I know there's a lot of questions here about how to get into engineering and hacking, and I'll get to those. And then at the same time, still involved in hacking. More of like, became InfoSec and then cybersecurity, and it started to become a career path. But that took a long time. In 1998, when I was part of the Loft, we testified in front of the United States Congress about the state of computer security in government and like, how bad off were computer systems with the internet. And, the famous thing that came out of that is hackers can take down the internet in 30 minutes, which some of the guys could do. I'm not going to claim that I could, but it was basically based on like some BGP routing issue, like when Facebook went down a couple of months ago. It was like that same issue that we had brought up, 20 something years ago. But that was the first time where people started realizing like, oh, hackers can be good, and maybe we should start working with hackers. So from that, we were just 7 guys in a clubhouse at the Loft, and we wanted to try to do that full time. So we started this company At Stake, which was a computer security consulting company. And that's where I learned a lot about, people's sort of behavior changes when money gets involved. But yeah, so, I left that in 2003 and have been basically designing products and teaching about hardware hacking. And then, this wallet hacking thing was just spur of the moment thing that happened. And now that's kind of a side business as well. So very exciting. And it really comes down to, just loving what you do, right? And I'll get into all of that when we answer questions. Let's see. Wow, New England and 9X. Bill Schramm. Is Bill Schramm actually here? Is that Garfield? Is that really Garfield? Talking about being in Michigan. Holy moly. Okay, so also I guess another question that's really common before we get into your actual questions is like my lab tour, right? So this is open lab. You can kind of see some of it behind me. Really everything I do is here, except for I have a 3D printer and a circuit board prototyping machine, a quick circuit 5000 made by T-Tech in another room because that's like messy and smelly and stuff. But here is pretty much like where all the magic happens. Components. I have like an audio generator, frequency counter, which I don't really use very much. That's why they're over here. Soldering station is a Metcal 500. And a bunch of like, a Weller rework station to, remove chips off of boards and put chips back on. Let's see, what else? There's like This is one of my favorite things. That's a vision engineering, what is it called? It's an inspection microscope. So it's not, super, super high magnification, but it's 5 or 6x. So it lets you inspect parts, make sure they're not tombstone and things when you're looking at a board. And then I have my oscilloscope, which you can't see, power supply, device programmer, multimeter, but that's kind of basically it. One of the things about hacking and really engineering is kind of knowing what equipment is out there, even if you don't have it yourself, because sometimes it can be expensive to get some of this stuff. And it's like knowing what's there or knowing somebody that has the equipment, right? So as long as you know there's resources, you can go and try to use those. Okay, let's see. Why don't we answer a question? Oh, I see one here. Squelch Tone is saying, oh, I thought he lived in Boston area with the Loft crew. Yes. Oh, and then Pedro says, can you share some stories from Loft days? Okay, yes. So I am currently in Portland, Oregon, but I grew up in Boston. And I joined the Loft after I got arrested, so 1992, and then left, basically 10 years later. And let's see, some stories from the Loft. It was really an interesting time. And what's funny is, like, we look back at those times, it's like, oh, that was, epic, legendary stuff. But at the time that we're doing it, we were just doing it because that's what we like to do. It wasn't like that we'd set out to do anything like that. Mudge had always said, like, we want to make a dent in the universe. And like, that was mostly when we were trying to push against vendors to like release, announce their vulnerabilities and things like that sooner. But really it was just this very organic, kind of flat, almost anarchist style community. And the Boston hacker scene at the time there was so many great people and so many other hacker spaces too, that were more hacker houses. So, there's like New Hack City, Messiah Village. Like, there was just a really good scene there. And I don't know if it was because all of the universities and stuff that were there. But yeah, I mean, the Loft, there's a lot of stuff that was public. I think one thing that people don't really realize is we kept a pretty rigid kind of schedule. Like, if I said I was going to do something, that got written down in like meeting notes. And then the next week that we'd have our meeting, they'd be like, hey, Joe, Kingpin, did you do XYZ? And if I didn't do it, they kind of held me to the fire. And it's like everybody had to pull their weight to keep the thing going and keep the momentum going of the Loft. And I think that goes with any group. What was really special back then is it was, really this core 7 of us that all just got together and worked well together. And it just happened to work, which you don't really find very often, right? So if you can find people that you trust, that you love working with, that's the best place to kind of group together. What I still haven't figured out, and nobody will answer from the Loft, of like, why did they accept me as this 16-year-old, punk juvenile delinquent into the Loft and kind of bring me under their wing? And they literally did save my life, because if I hadn't had that outlet to go to after school, then I would just keep going and doing what I was doing and probably get arrested again and go down a different way. So it really was just very, very special for me, and it just such a formative time of like, this was amazing. And then, of course, over time, we would do a lot of that media exposure to try to get people to realize hacking always, hacking is not always bad. But yeah, as far as other stories, like, we just had a lot of fun going on road trips and going to flea markets and laughing and joking and just a lot of stuff that, groups of friends do. And what was so cool also is like Mudge and Weld, like, they were software. So they had their software room that they were working on stuff. This was in the later Loft. The early Loft was just one giant kind of space. And then me and Brian Oblivion and Space Rogue were in the hardware room. And, we all had our different skills, and that's what made it really, really fun when we all came together to do stuff. But it was just it was awesome. It was like, I can't even explain how great a feeling it was to be involved in that. And looking back at it now, I really realize how special that was, of finding a group of people to work with together. So highly recommend it if you can find people as well. So I know Karan had sent an email related to this. So how did you learn to do hacking and the journey of learning hacking? And, I've always said, like, you can't teach somebody to be a hacker. What I try to do a lot of times in my training classes is get people to think like a hacker, right? So it's not really as much about using the tools as it is having that mindset, that kind of mischievous mindset of going after a piece of hardware or going after a piece of software to try to figure out how it works and make it do something that the engineers hadn't intended, and all of those things. So on one hand, it's hard to teach, but on the other hand, with practice, you can get it, right? Just like anything else. There's, I don't know the exact thing. It's like the 10,000 hour whatever. So if you practice something for 10,000 hours, you'll be, proficient. But I just feel like if you have that curiosity and that mindset to go after something, learning hacking is just by doing. And there's so many resources out there now, no matter what field you want to get into, whether it's hardware hacking or software or web app or, IoT things or cryptography or whatever. Like there's so many different ways to go, and you can find resources and find what you're into and then go that way and say, okay, I'm going to experiment and, maybe do a CTF, a capture the flag competition at a conference, or maybe online there are some, but you can kind of just mess around and see what things you like doing. And then that turns into something. Like really for me, when I was doing the hacking, when I was younger, it was mostly just because I was just pissed off at the world. And the reality was, I was skateboarding and causing trouble without a computer. And then the computer for me, because I was so attracted to it and I just loved having that power, it was mostly to kind of have power that I shouldn't have and kind of mess with people. So it wasn't really this, really the best approach, but it really did serve me, and I learned how to use that power for good. But it was all about curiosity and doing things on my own and building projects. And I would build projects out of magazines. So, Electronics Now, Radio Electronics. A lot of these magazines are online on the Internet Archive. So if you go to archive.org, you can find these old electronics magazines. And they had awesome projects. I would build stun guns and laser listeners, like you hear about the government shining lasers at windows and they'll vibrate. And you can hear what's going on inside. So I would build all of those things that were interesting to me and then try to kind of modify those. And hacking the same way, I would build red boxes and blue boxes to do, phone network manipulation stuff. So I think as far as the journey of learning hacking, it's all about what you are passionate about and what you love to do, and then just doing it. Follow these resource guides that are out there and then start modifying things, and do things on your own. But it really, I think, is not something that can be taught. It really just has to be something that you do. Oh my God, there's so many questions. Hi from New Zealand and Portugal. Okay, wow, this is a huge, huge chat. Oh, I also wanted to do this too. So again, this is my first YouTube live experience, AMA, Q&A stuff, but my kids are really into watching YouTube, live streamers and Minecraft and Fortnite and all of that. And they had said that for YouTubers starting out, I've had a YouTube account for a long time, but I've not had a video like the wallet hacking video get as many views. So, once you reach 100,000 subscribers, you end up getting a special award from YouTube, which I had no idea about until Freddie, one of my partners, was like, hey, you reached 100,000 subscribers, you get a plaque. And I'm like, what? So I had no idea. But my son had said that I'm supposed to open this on the live stream because that's what people do. So I'm going to open it on the live stream. And, I just want to say that before this video, I think we had 9 or 10,000 views, which is fine with me. If I have an audience of people that are interested in the content, that's great. I had no idea that we would get this many. And so this award really is for everybody, right? It's like for all of you out there that are hackers or curious about being a hacker and want to learn more about this stuff and follow. So it's really an honor for me to realize how many people are out there that actually care about this stuff. It's great because like the more of us that are out there, I think the better the world's going to be. So thank you for the support. By the way, we are making other videos. So the wallet hacking video is not going to be the last one. We have a bunch of other stuff in the works. So stay tuned for that. As soon as we can release stuff, it's not going to be like most YouTubers that are like every week or whatever, but it's gonna happen when we have something worthy, and hopefully that you will, continue to like that stuff as well. All right, so it's kind of hard to see what I'm doing, but here's this. Oh, okay, so here's the letter. Let's see. Some 100,000 Well, it says, okay, this is weird. YouTube, some 100,000 subscribers. Just how far have you come? If each of your subscribers were a light year, they could take you from one side of the Milky Way to the other. That's far. And it's why today we're so excited to celebrate your special YouTube journey with you. Not only have you brought a unique voice and style to the world, you've also created valuable connections and built a community along the way. The community is you. In that spirit, YouTube is proud to present you with the Silver Creator Award, which celebrates your hard work and incredible achievement, which is really my hard work and everybody behind the scenes who made the video and all of you watching, right? So it's sort of, you know, it's never a single person. And that's the same thing with hacking. I'm going to get into that about hacking in that sort of quest for ego as well. Congratulations on this amazing milestone. Just one of many that we hope will follow in the future. I think the next one is 1 million subscribers. So let's see if we can get to 1 million. Then I will be blown away. If there's 1 million people that actually care about hacking, you know, and electronics and video stuff, like how cool would that be? Let's see. After all, there are countless others out there who have yet to discover your passion and dedication. Whether they come to your channel to learn something new or just for a laugh, a whole new audience is waiting for you to inspire them, just as your growing community continues to inspire you. We can't wait to see what you do next, and we'll be with you every step of the way. Yours sincerely, Susan something, CEO YouTube. Well, that's cool. Okay, so there's the letter. And now, woo-wee, look at this. I'm going to get this out of here. Okay, let's see. So here it comes in a box with a desiccant. This is like an unboxing, right? It's let's see. Okay, so here it is in the bag. Presented to Joe Grand for passing 100,000 subscribers. So thank you. Super cool. That's going to go on my wall, probably like back in that section or something. Okay, let's see. Let's do some questions. So there's a couple that are kind of the same. What's the best advice for an electrical engineering student? I just saw one here. Random says, do you think electronics engineering is a good choice for a major? And then there's a couple others related to that. Like, what was that? Like Alex and Miles and Nathan have all asked a similar question. Like, is engineering a viable option? Hell yeah. Like, you know, engineers and hackers are the ones that are creating everything that we're using. And there's a whole range of engineering, right? You have lots of different things. I was a computer engineer, so I started down the path of doing electrical engineering, but found that a lot of the stuff in school was very like, what's the word? Like theoretical. So just a lot of math and a lot of like low level stuff that just didn't interest me. But computer engineering was this combination of computer science and electrical engineering, basically embedded system types of stuff. And that's the type of stuff by the time I'd gone to college, I'd already been hacking on things and building my own projects and building my own microprocessor based systems and stuff. So that just seemed like a natural fit, this computer engineering degree. And I don't know if electrical engineering has changed since then more into computer engineering, because really electronics and embedded systems and microcontrollers and all of these things are just so intertwined now. But yeah, I mean, I think it's a great way to go. The good thing with engineering is that you always have the fallback of like these big companies, right, that are doing major engineering work. And it might not be Apple or Samsung or companies like that, but there's a lot of companies doing a lot of engineering that I would say always need engineers. So even if you don't want to go off on your own and do your own thing, like I did, you can start off in a place where you can really learn a lot and then take that maybe and go off on your own and do stuff. So yeah, I mean, engineering, the fact that you can have something in your head, have some idea and then make it into something real is awesome, right? It's like the best feeling. It's just like, you know, when you hack the wallet or you find some vulnerability in a piece of software or whatever, the fact that you can imagine something and do it. So yeah, engineering is definitely recommended. Let's see. The best advice I would say is do stuff outside of school also. So just like I talked about with hacking of like, you know, my passion, I was always doing it. You basically just want to do what you love. And I feel like school a lot of times is going to give you that really good background knowledge and some experience and exposure, maybe with some tools that you might not have. But you always want to do like extracurricular stuff. In my case, it was the loft. By the time I was in college, I was still in the loft. But it can be anything. Work on projects, put stuff up on GitHub, share your resources, go to meetups, go to hacker conferences, like all these things, because you love it, but also because it could be useful later when you're going for a job. And it's kind of like, okay, you went to school, great, you got good grades, great. But what are you actually doing to apply that stuff in a way that show that you know what you're doing? Because just because you do well on tests or you do well in school doesn't mean anything about how you can contribute, to the world. There's a lot of hackers I know, a lot of people that I know that never even went to college, and especially in the hacker world, or the what are we calling it now? The cybersecurity community. It's not always required. I definitely think it's important. I think those formative years of being in college and having that kind of process of learning how to structure your time and learning how to work with people in groups for group projects. Like, I think all of that's important, more so than like what you're actually learning, but just that time, as you're growing. Because looking back, I felt so grown up in college and independent and everything. And it's like, well, I kind of wasn't, and so I think it's just good for that social side. But the technical side, again, like there's resources for all this stuff that you can learn on your own. But if you can meet people, and work with them and everything, and yeah, I think there's just so many options. So yes to engineering. Good way to go. And also at the same time, there's a question here about ethical hacking. Oh yeah, Sam had asked any advice on the pathway to practicing ethical hacking. This all goes together. There are actually now InfoSec cybersecurity related programs in colleges, which there wasn't, when I was in school, and when a lot of us were in school. It was basically computer science, electrical engineering, and that's it. But the fact that there are now security programs, Dakota State University has a really good security program. There's a bunch of other ones too. I can't remember offhand. Purdue University. There's just, a lot of, probably every university now has some sort of security program or ethical hacking program. And I think that's the same sort of thing. You can take these classes and learn these skills, but you have to do it on your own. You have to love what you do. If you're doing it just to, have a good high paying job, it's not going to work. Like, I was in college and remember asking some of my classmates, like, why'd you get into engineering? And they're like, oh, my parents said it was a good career path. And like, they didn't last through the 4 years. Once it got to the actual like hands-on senior design project and all of this stuff, like they just didn't like it. So ethical hacking is the same thing. There's so many ways to learn about hacking now too. But you want to learn that stuff on your own. And then also, if you can, go to college and get that education, but really just find the thing that you love and do it. That applies to everything in life, not just engineering and not just hacking. And that's sort of like, there's no magic bullet, right? It's just, if you love what you do, you will be successful. And your passion is going to come through in that, right? So again, it's not about the degrees. It's not about how many vulnerabilities you've released. It's not about how many talks you've given, or if you're on YouTube live, like none of that matters, right? It all comes down to like, what are you doing to help the community? What are you doing to share information and make the world better? And like, that's what it all comes down to. I do want to say too, related to that. So I talked, I've mentioned briefly about kind of ego in cybersecurity in the hacker world. And, when I was a kid, that was the thing, is everybody wanted to have that piece of information that made them better than other people. Because we were all, teenagers trying to share this stuff. But looking back, it's sort of like, that's not really the point. And what really changed it for me is when I started teaching and doing my hardware hacking classes and giving presentations, which I love doing. Don't get me wrong. Like, being on stage is the best feeling in the world if you have something worth sharing. But it was seeing people take that knowledge and then apply it on their own, and sort of using that as a stepping stone was like, oh my God, this is so cool. Because now you are spreading that knowledge. You're, whatever the saying is, like you're teaching a man to fish instead of giving them the fish, or whatever it is. But you're teaching people these things, and then they go off and do great things. And that's what's so cool. So it really comes down, it shouldn't come down to just doing it to be famous or whatever. It should be to empower other people, because there's nothing cooler than seeing friends of mine, or even people that I don't know, go off, they maybe watched a video I did or saw a talk, go off and be an engineer and design something cool. And like, I got an email the other day, and somebody had like seen Prototype This, which was a TV show I was on. Actually, I have the DVD here. This was a TV show I was on Discovery Channel back in 2007, 2008. And somebody had seen that as a kid and now became an engineer, worked at Apple, designed all of these things. So it really is wild to see that progression. By the way, this is available on BitTorrent, the Pirate Bay. I think there's some episodes. You can find the DVDs on eBay also. But this, by the way, was 4 of us building crazy prototypes of projects and showing the engineering process. There wasn't really a lot of hacking in the traditional sense of like security, but there was hacking things together to make crazy things. So there's like 10-foot giant boxing robots. So you can actually see the head of one of those right there. So that was the head of one of our robots that would fight based on the movement of players outside the ring. So like Real Steel, the movie, apparently was based off of our stuff. I don't know if that's true. All-terrain vehicle, giant computer-controlled water slide simulator. So yeah, really cool show. If you are interested in engineering and want to see the real-world engineering process of how stuff is built and tested and prototyped, like that's what this was about. Just like the wallet hacking video was trying to show the real side of what hacking is, because most of the time people don't want to just watch you type all the time. I had a friend actually when I was a kid, my oldest childhood friend who I'm still in touch with, who is a writer, not technical at all. He would come up to my computer room that I talked about earlier and would just watch me type programs into from magazines, or connect to some bulletin board system, or connect to like an elevator control system or a credit bureau to pull people's credit card number, all of these things. He would just watch me, even though he had no idea what I was doing. So there are people like that. I would watch people play video games, and we know that's a huge thing now with esports. But most people want to see something a little more exciting, and that's what we're trying to do with all that stuff. Let's see. What's my thought? I just happened to see this one. My PC and tech vids. What's your thought on metaverse? Okay, so at the same time as loving technology, I despise technology, which is sort of like, well, that doesn't make sense, does it? I kind of call myself a technology curmudgeon, where I think there's a lot of good that we can do with technology, as far as teaching people and all the things I talked about, hacking things and forcing companies to make better products by hacking them and showing them how they need to change things, because that helps society. But there's a lot of times too where technology is kind of abused by large corporations and used for data harvesting and privacy violations and spying on you and tracking and all the big data stuff and biometrics, all of these things that I talked about it earlier, of like, engineering's great, you can build whatever you want. The problem though is that not everybody feels like we do as far as helping people. Some people feel like doing it as a way to control people or get more information to sell and make money and marketing and advertising. So I'm not a huge fan of technology a lot of times and how it's used. So, IoT stuff, Amazon, Alexa, like all these things, cameras in your houses. Like, I think all of that stuff is just horrible. It's bad enough that I have a cell phone that I bring into the house, right? Because I know that it has a microphone. It could possibly be compromised. But it's one of those things that there's a balance, right? You can't be a total hermit, because then you'll never be able to do anything with anybody. But on the other hand, I'm just constantly thinking about, why are these companies creating these technologies? Do they actually care about me as a user, or do they want my data for something? So whether it's social media, which is, of course, the big one, being tracked, metaverse, to me is just Facebook on steroids. And I think there are some cool maybe applications of some of that stuff. So if we could use the technologies without them being based around data harvesting, like, that would be awesome. It's just, unfortunately, a lot of people are building products and building technologies not because they should, but because they can. And not everything that's built is actually beneficial. So yeah, I'm definitely more like, I don't have Facebook. I'm not on a lot of things. Twitter is my only real connection to the outside world. And now hopefully, doing more YouTube videos, but that's all very controlled, right? It's like a YouTube video is only going to show what I want the world to know. Twitter is only going to show what I want the world to know. With a lot of the technology, metaverse, Facebook, this, the other thing, whatever, that's just our general daily use of technology that's being monitored. So whether we want people to know it or not, these companies have it and they sell it. And then some people say, well, it doesn't matter, you know, I'm not doing anything illegal. But it's just this slippery slope of like, we don't have to use technology in that way. But anyway, so what do I think about the metaverse? I don't know. We'll see what happens. I just feel like with everything else, it's just going to be abused and used to, you know, exploit us as users and take our data and do something else with it. You know, you give any big company or any person too much power, it never works out well. Okay, let's see. What's the mask behind you? Oh, I think I answered that one, right? So that's the robot head from the Prototype This Boxing Robots episode. How can I contact you? Okay, so here's one. We have gotten so much email, and one of the things that I really think is important is kind of transparency, right? Of like showing the whole process and showing things. And if somebody sends me an email, I try to answer it. There's a couple ways to contact me, but because I'm so overwhelmed, it's getting harder and harder to actually respond to everybody's email, which is why I think doing these AMAs and trying to catch up with everybody's questions is probably the best way to go. But you can contact me through my website, which is grandideastudio.com, and there's a contact link there. You can also contact me through offspec.io, which is our wallet hacking, you know, cryptocurrency wallet hacking business. There's a contact form there. Those are probably the best. Like I don't read comments. So if you ask a question in a YouTube video, or if you ask a question on Twitter, I'm probably not going to see it. And that's mostly just for like my mental health of knowing how attached I get to what people say. So it's just better for me to not read the comments, right? So if you want to contact me directly through one of those things. And I would love to, you know, be more active online with answering questions that way. It would just take forever. But the internet also is like, the internet's just mean, right? It's like, no matter what you do, there's always somebody mean. And those are the ones that would really get to me and make me, you know, really pissed off. So I just figure it's better to not engage in that and then just try to talk to people one-on-one or in an environment like that, like this, where we can do stuff. It would be so cool if it was actually like more of a Zoom meeting where we can see each other also. Here's one that just went by. Somebody had said, what is the brand of my beanie? So thank you for asking. This beanie, by the way, I'm wearing it backwards because I didn't want to put the logo on there. This is the logo for Ground Control, which is an arcade here in Portland, a barcade, I guess, but they have, you know, lots of classic arcade games and everything. And it's just cool to have an outlet like that and have a resource to go to and play games and eat food. And it's very low key, and they have concerts once in a while. So yeah, so I wear this hat a lot. I have no idea. Actually, does it say on the inside what the brand is? No one's ever asked me that before. It's completely worn away. But if you contact Ground Control with a K, Kontrol, they probably still sell these, and you can ask them like what brand it is. Let's see. Okay, so Julio asks, and this is related to some that I've seen that people emailed me in advance too. So I may be late, but do you still offer classes? Would seem cool to take one. And then there's a couple other ones here, like, yeah, do you do online training videos? Frank had asked that. Lincoln had asked, you know, learning and practicing hardware hacking. So yeah, so again, one of the things that I do is teach hardware hacking classes. A lot of times those are like private classes, so on-site for a company or, you know, some organization that brings all of their employees there. Sometimes it's engineers that want to learn the hacker mindset, so learning how to, I don't really have any hardware here, you know, how to take a piece of hardware apart, identify the components on the board, see if there's anything communicating that you can monitor communication between, and kind of go through that whole hardware hacking process. So when I do it with engineers, it's about having them realize like, oh, things that engineers design into systems, like debug interfaces, UART interfaces, administration interfaces, test points, all of these things that are useful for engineers can be used against them from a hacker perspective. And then if I do this for hackers, it's more about just understanding why engineers are designing systems this way and the constraints that engineers have to design products and get them working on time and on budget and all of that. So it kind of depends. I do some public classes as well throughout the year. Usually those are through like a conference. So this year, I think I have a couple. I have one scheduled in Black Hat, Singapore, one scheduled in Black Hat, US, one scheduled in California at hardware.io. Usually I'll do one or two public ones a year. This time, because of COVID, I'm trying to like catch up and do a lot more public stuff. If you go to my website, grandideastudio.com/events, you'll see all of the publicly confirmed scheduled events. So there's a couple there. And the problem with those, sort of a problem, is like if you work at a company, that's fine because they can pay for you to go and pay for the class and all of that. They're not cheap. And that's just a fact of how conferences have to run their event and pay people to get there and host, rent the room and all of this stuff. They're definitely cheaper than private sessions. Once in a while, I'll host my own classes as well. Usually, I want to do one in Portland, but I've done them in California and in Washington, D.C., but mostly in the U.S. If there's enough interest, if you're somewhere and you can get a bunch of people together, maybe there's, a hacker group or a maker space or a university or somebody that, you can get 12 or more people together, then it might be, worth going out there and doing stuff. But what I always say is like, yes, I do these classes. I'm not always available to do, the free classes or cheap classes, which is just the reality of the situation. But everything that I teach, there's no secret sauce. Like all of that stuff is pretty much on my website. So if you go to the security section of the portfolio on my website, there's a ton of different talks about hardware hacking that I've given over the years. My classes are basically just more formalized, structured versions of those, longer versions of those. I do use this little circuit board that is this G-shaped circuit board that's in the shape of my logo. That's a microchip PIC based system, so a microcontroller, and there's something covered in epoxy, and there's some lights that blink on and off when you press buttons. And basically in that class, at least in the 2-day basic class, which is the first one that I always teach before I do anything else with people, there's a bunch of stuff on the board we have to figure out. There's a security mechanism on here. So when you defeat the security, it stops blinking the lights and turns into a game of Simon, like that memory game. So this is something you have to figure out how the system works, add some components, modify the circuit board, stuff like that. So I don't sell these, by the way, because supporting this would just be a complete pain. I have them. And if you're interested in messing around with one, and the information, again, like some of the stuff is on my website, but I don't put schematics because I don't want those out there. But there are actually schematics on my website that are similar to this that could be used. But yeah, you could always reach out and I could, maybe send you some for probably $20, I think is what I'm doing on these, just to recoup my costs, but I just can't support them. But basically all of the information besides this is on my website. So there's no secrets there. So if you can't come to a class, start there. Other resources too. Let's see, I actually have it here. This book just came out. This is by Jasper and Colin O'Flynn. This is a book called The Hardware Hacking Handbook. This has been in the works for a long time. This is by far the best book about hardware hacking and getting involved in it as far as a resource kind of reference perspective. It mostly goes into some pretty advanced stuff relatively quickly. So fault injection, like what we did for the Trezor wallet, is chapter 6. Like it goes into all sorts of different stuff, setting up a lab, resources, also some basic serial interfaces and security stuff and chip level and things. So as far as resources go, I would recommend getting this to have along with everything else. Also other resources too. So if you can't, attend one of my classes, that's the thing, as I mentioned this earlier, right? It's like, there's so much information out there that if you can find it and use it, that's, you have what you need. On YouTube, Stack Smashing, which is Thomas Roth, does some really awesome videos. He had hacked the AirTag recently and using fault injection and sort of explain that process. Does a lot of cool stuff with Game Boy and other things. Live Overflow is another YouTube channel that does a lot of, InfoSec, cybersecurity, hacking related stuff. Those two I highly recommend. Hackaday, Exploiteers, EXPLOITEE.RS. is a website. I don't know how active they are anymore, but they have a website of like all of these consumer products that they've hacked over the years. And a lot of the hacks, as you'll see, are based on the same kind of class of attack, whether it's using the debug interface, or it's fault injection to enable the debug interface, or it's using a bootloader through the UART interface that has some administration mode that you can stop during the boot process and then access something. So a lot of systems have these common classes of attack, and the exploiteers is awesome because you could go and find, say, a product that you have, or you find something that you're interested in, you go buy the thing on eBay and follow along with their hack, and that's how you can really learn stuff also. Infocon.org is a website that's run by the Dark Tangent, who had started DEF CON. He had started Black Hat also, which is more of like the corporate, conference that is just massive now. And this website is just an archive of, he's trying to archive like every hacker conference video presentation that's out there. So you can dig through those and find amazing hardware hacking stuff, but just amazing hacking stuff in general. That's the way to go. So I guess to answer the short version of the question is like, do I still offer my classes? Yes. Are they always accessible to everybody? No. It just depends on where I am at that point where I am in the world. Are they required to be a hacker? No, right? Because all of this information is out there. So hopefully, you'll be able to join, and I'll be able to do more classes for you guys in the future, and we'll just see how that goes. But I do try to have a good mix of like private on-site stuff, which helps pay the bills for me to actually support my family, and then doing more community-based kind of public conferences, and then sometimes even doing some free, workshop as well. I will do those for schools more often, because school budgets and stuff are so low, but mostly like for kids, right? To see kids realize that they don't have to just buy something and treat it as is. Like they can take it apart and hack on it and do something. Like that's the cool thing. Let's see. Okay, so Cramerica Industries. I read your intro to Colin and Jasper's book. Right, so I wrote the foreword to this book, which is pretty awesome. Very honored to be able to write that. This book actually, when it first started, like 5 or 6 years ago, there was a whole bunch of us involved in the project. And then little by little, it was like, oh, I'm too busy. This is too hard. And then Colin and Jasper took it over and just like completely crushed it. So so I wrote the book forward, which is cool. And so they say, I thought Joe Grand was some guy who would look like the Kingpin from Daredevil. Yeah. So, well, it's like, there was some, this is totally dating me, but there was a cartoon in the New Yorker magazine back in the day that was like, on the internet, no one knows you're a dog. And it was like a dog using a computer. But yeah, that was always my thing of like, when I chose Kingpin as the handle, as my hacker name, I was 16 and I had already gone through a whole bunch of other handles, which I'll mention in a second. But Kingpin to me just seemed like this total badass, criminal, fighting against these superheroes. And you had the big diamond, like from, Spider-Man, and it just seemed so cool. So in my head, I was like, yeah, I'm Kingpin, but in reality, I was still a kid just getting, made fun of in school and outcast for skateboarding and all of these things. But yeah, so in my head, I still feel like that, but in reality, not so much. Let's see some of my other names, by the way. So I started off when I was 7 was Black Ninja. And I look back now, when my kids were younger, they would also call themselves Black Ninja without knowing mine. And I'm like, okay, well, I guess that makes sense, right? Because every kid loves ninjas. And most ninjas are, dressed in black. So it's funny that was my name for a long time. I had one called Autovon, which was some part of the government military phone system. I had one called Astro Zombie, which I was a huge fan of the Misfits growing up, the horror punk band, the Misfits. And that's the other thing too. I didn't mention this, but I'd mention it sometimes in talks of like growing up, not only hacking, but being involved in like the punk rock kind of hardcore scene, learning all about the DIY, do-it-yourself ethos and going to shows and seeing these bands traveling around, doing it on their own without corporate support and everything. Like that was very powerful. So yeah, Astro Zombie was one. Garfield, if he's actually still in the chat, might remember I was agent or FBI agent for a while, which is totally not original at all. Now that I think about it, it's like, okay, that's really bad. For a while in one kind of sub hacker group I was in, I had the name Skateboard Joe. So thanks to Garfield for that one. And yeah, a bunch of different ones, but then Kingpin just stuck. And that one seemed the coolest. I still think it's better if somebody else gives you the nickname, which wasn't really happening back then. Like you had to choose your own handle. But I always feel like the names that people have been given by other people are way funnier. But yeah, so I'm not, unfortunately, not in appearance as cool as Kingpin. Let's see. Oh God, there are so many questions. Do I still play drums? Nice, Gustavo. Yeah, so sometimes I play drums. I think there was some video that showed me playing drums. I was in a band back in Boston. That was just some friends messing around. But a good way to kind of get your, aggression out. So I do still play drums once in a while, just on my own. I have a set of like Roland V drums, like electric drums. And I've been taking a guitar class with my younger son just to learn, like I want to learn power chords so I can kind of rock out, to myself. I don't know if any of this stuff will ever see the light of day, but I think having a balance, that was the other thing too. When I got in trouble when I was a kid, having a balance, like I had to, at that point, my parents knew that I was kind of doing stuff on the computer, but they didn't know what, or they didn't want to admit that they knew what I was doing. But once I got arrested, they were like, all right, you have to do a sport or get a job, have some sort of balance. They did still let me do computer stuff, and they actually paid my rent at the loft, which was really nice because it was like $50 a month. And I decided to start running as something else because I was like, I'm not going to work. So I started running and joined the track team, and that ended up being a real balance because I was like a kind of chubby, short, chubby kid that used computers. But being able to start running and start exercising helped me with that sort of whatever teenage angst I had. But it also gave me this balance of like I could do stuff hardcore on the computer, bang stuff out, do whatever I want to do, but then have that balance of going outside and like moving my body. Ended up being really important. And the same thing with music is drumming is, I'm definitely not a natural musician. I think I'm a natural hacker. Everything else takes a lot more work. But it's fun to do. And it's a good balance of like, if I'm working on something now and it's like, I just can't figure it out, leaving the room and taking a break, whether it is running or drumming or meditating. Like I've gotten super into meditation as well. Try to do that every day to really keep me balanced and understand, what stress I'm putting on myself, what I'm doing to, make the world better, and how I can be grateful to people like you for, a chat like this, and grateful for my family and my friends and all of these things. So yeah, a lot of stuff, it's like what you see online again is what we want people to see, but it's not always the reality. Right. So like, there's been a lot of struggles for me, and having that balance of drumming and running and other things, I think has been really good. Let's see. So yeah, so Mohammed has asked recommendations for getting started. Hazim had asked, how do I start? Yeah, so I answered some of that stuff earlier. There are a lot of good resources for getting into hacking and electronics. Let's see. D Gringo, I have 5 people here in Switzerland who have problems with a wallet they don't have access to. Okay, so yeah, that's a good question. Regarding wallet hacking, it has surprised a lot of people that my first foray into cryptocurrency was through that wallet hacking project that I just did. So if you haven't seen that video, it's on my YouTube channel, called like how I hacked a cryptocurrency hardware wallet for $2 million or something like that. Before that, somebody had sent me some Bitcoin like a couple years ago as a tip for a project I was working on, which is the JTagulator, which is a hardware-based device that lets you hook up to test points on a circuit board, and it will figure out if there's debug interfaces or UART and stuff like that, like a hardware hacking tool. And so a guy had sent me a tip in Bitcoin, and I didn't know what to do with it. Like I set up an Electrum wallet and just let it sit there for years and years, and didn't really think about it. Like when Bitcoin started back in the day, I think it was like 2010, 2011. My wife was like, "You should buy some Bitcoin," because all my friends were buying it, and I'm like, "Oh, that's too confusing. I don't even know how to like put money in to be able to buy Bitcoin." So I totally blew off cryptocurrency until Dan reached out to me with his wallet hacking need for wallet hacking, and that's when I realized like, oh crap, like this has really exploded into like a whole other culture. So once we filmed that wallet hacking video, we realized, okay, there must be a business for this, right? There must be other people that need help. If Dan lost his password, there has to be other people. And I had no idea, again, because I wasn't really paying attention to cryptocurrency. I had no idea how huge the cryptocurrency world was and how many people actually have lost their wallets. So we decided, my partners who had helped film this video, we had started offspec.io to kind of have a formal service of helping people unlock their wallets, whether it's hardware hacking, stuff like here's what the another Trezor, different Trezor that I'd hacked, an earlier version of hardware, but wiring it up to do some fault injection to get the contents off, or we can help with software-based password cracking. So we kind of set up this thing just for that. So as far as like your friends that need help, you can contact us. Go to offspec.io and contact us there, and we'll respond, and you'll fill out like a little questionnaire. And we've gotten hundreds of messages from our video release about that. And that's when we realized, like, oh wow, this is a huge space, especially because a lot of people that got involved in cryptocurrency early, it wasn't worth anything, right? It's like they put in $100 and then not think about it, and now it's worth millions, tens of millions, whatever it is. And then they realize, like, oh shoot, I need to get access to my private key or my PIN or whatever, I forget. So yeah, it's definitely something we can look into. A lot of the emails that we got were people that were scammed. So I actually have a question on here related to that, of from Liam asking about how to properly store passwords and seed phrases. And there's a lot of scams online, and it's something, especially with cryptocurrency, you just don't know who to trust. And that's a problem not only when you're investing in cryptocurrency, but also when you're trying to find somebody to help you break your wallet. For that off-spec service I'm talking about, for stuff we're doing, like, we don't take money up front. If somebody asks you to pay them money up front to do something, it's probably not good, right? So don't send people money just because they ask for it. Again, being transparent and open in the process and everything. But yeah, so a lot of the emails were scams, people that had gotten scammed and looking for help. And like, we can't get into that because that's kind of law enforcement issue or this or that. Like, we're not going to go hack back somebody else's system to go after them. Like, that's just not what we do. And that's going to open up a whole can of worms. But other video or other emails we've gotten, were from people. A lot of emails were from people that needed help. So don't feel bad if you have lost your cryptocurrency. We'll see if we can help you in some way. Let's see. Gonzalo says, what are your most must-haves for hardware hacking and prototyping? Okay. So yeah, I did my little lab tour earlier, but really, if I had to start with something, and actually, that's a good question too. I think some other people had asked that through email. At a minimum, you want to have something that lets you visualize what signals are doing on a board. So I have my oscilloscope, which is a high-end. It's an Agilent, which is now known as Keysight, DSO 7054A, 500 megahertz bandwidth, 4 gigasample, big oscilloscope, 4 channels. But you don't really need something that high-end. You can get away with like a logic analyzer that lets you see digital signals and how they're changing over time. Where, most of the stuff, an oscilloscope is going to let you see analog signals and really fast glitches in signals and things like that. But to get started, just to be able to visualize and see what chips are communicating on a board and how they're communicating, which is going to usually almost always be digital, binary communication, getting a logic analyzer. So I'm a huge fan of Saleae, SAELEA or something like that. They make a bunch of different logic analyzers. Their low-end version, unfortunately, they had like a really good educational 4-channel, more slower, but fine for almost, most digital stuff that we're looking at. They discontinued that. So that was the one that was affordable. The ones I have now are like the Logic Pro 8 and above. So it's like a couple $100, maybe more. I think they do have an educational discount. So if you're a student, you can ask them and you'll get a discount. But you can also find clones of those. You can find cheaper logic analyzers. I think Bitmagic is one that's a logic analyzer. There's an open source logic analyzer software suite called SIGROK on cross-platform, SIGROK. So you can find hardware that works with that. But it really comes down to being able to monitor communication. So having a logic analyzer or oscilloscope is key. I think having a device programmer. So I have a Zeltec, what is it? It's a Super Pro 501S, I think it is. And that is a tool that lets you read and write different types of memory. So if we're trying to get firmware off of devices, or we're trying to get data off of, say, an external EEPROM or serial flash memory or whatever, That's just a tool that makes it really easy. There are other ones too. There's I use one in my class. I can't remember what it's called. It's smaller. It's a Mini Pro. So a Mini Pro, either a TL8662 or the T56 device programmer. And these things support like tens of thousands of memory devices. And there's a lot of times where people getting into hardware hacking, if they're coming from the software space, they say, oh, I could just write up some script to communicate with the memory and get the memory off and all of that. And it's like, yeah, you could craft your own stuff, but using an off-the-shelf tool that's designed specifically for that. And these are engineering tools, right? So we're basically using a lot of engineering tools just to reverse engineer. I'm just a fan of using the right stuff that I know is going to get the job done, because then it removes a lot of chance of error of something happening, you know, introducing some error or some other problem. So yeah, getting a device programmer, getting an oscilloscope, logic analyzer, soldering iron. So I have a Metcal soldering iron, but there's a million different types of soldering irons, really anything with a small tip. One of the ones that I use in my class is it's like a no-name brand. Oh, a TS100. So it's kind of a generic name, TS100 soldering iron. If you search for that, the brand I got it from is SainsMart, SAINSMART Pro 32, but it's all basically the same thing, manufactured by the same company. It's open source also, so you can look in the code, change, how it's heating the soldering iron tip and all of that stuff. Somebody actually wrote a game for it that you can load firmware into this thing and hold the soldering iron by the iron tip and play Tetris on the buttons, and there's a little tiny screen. So the worse you do at Tetris, the hotter the soldering iron tip gets. So you could do that also. But yeah, check out that soldering iron. And probably just some basic stuff like wire. Maybe a USB to serial adapter. So I have one here. A lot of times when you're dealing with embedded systems, so electronic systems, routers, anything pretty much, usually is going to have what's called a UART interface, or an asynchronous serial interface, or serial port, or whatever you want to call it, that basically is sending out information that if we have our logic analyzer that we can visually see it, we can sometimes usually decode that data with the logic analyzer. But having something like this is a USB to serial adapter. This one is from Adafruit, called the FTDI friend, but there's a whole bunch of them that are based on the FTDI FT232 series, which takes in, you plug it into your computer, it will create a virtual COM port on your computer, and then you can load a terminal program, connect your target to the other side, and then see all of the data that's being sent from the target system on your computer, and then even type back stuff. So these are really good because the UART interface is one of the first things that you find when you're attacking a piece of hardware, looking for that interface, because engineers almost always use it because it's so convenient to have human readable text for, boot logs, bootloader information, all of that stuff. So highly recommended to have one of these as well. And I think just those are probably the basic things. And then as you start working on more projects, you might need I need a smaller set of wire clippers, or I need some headers, or like you end up building up a whole selection of components for things. And you can't see it, but over on this wall is a shelf with like boxes full of microprocessors, microcontrollers, sensors, wireless stuff. So you just start building up, and then as you need stuff, you can start hacking on things. Let's see, what languages do I code in? So most of the stuff that I work on is in C. I really like having as much low-level control as I can if I'm working on a system, but sometimes it's not possible. So it really comes down to like what environment you're working on. So a lot of stuff I do, like for this system that I use in my training class, that's microchip pick, and I write in C for that. So a lot of embedded system stuff I'll do in C, because you still get a low-level access to registers and to manipulate memory and all of these things. With not a lot of like overhead and resource, too much abstraction is going to just make it way too hard to work with these systems, especially if there's not a lot of resources on the chip itself. So, a lot of people don't like C because you can make a whole lot of errors with it and a whole lot of problems. But I still think that's the main language that people are using for embedded systems. Assembly language as well. So definitely if you're working with microcontroller-based systems, or you're hacking on something and you need to reverse engineer some firmware, you definitely want to be familiar with assembly language. ARM is probably the most common things these days. And if you learn one type of assembly, it's not that hard to kind of take that knowledge and then apply it to other architectures. So definitely going down that path. Something that just popped into my head, Azeria, who is on Twitter, I think as like 0x Azeria or 0x Fox or something like that. Azera. They have a whole bunch of resources on ARM, reverse engineering and exploitation and stuff. So really understanding that bare metal, low level functionality is super important. If you want to start reverse engineering code, you could use Ghidra, which is funny enough created by the NSA in the United States, the National Security Agency. So the agency that's basically spying on all of us wrote this tool that they were using themselves, and then they released this reverse engineering tool. So it will take your, say, a binary blob that you extract from a microcontroller or using your device programmer or whatever. It will turn that back into, it'll disassemble it, so turn it back into assembly language. And then it will also try to decompile it back into like a higher level language. So a lot of times these systems are not created in assembly language because they're so complicated that writing an assembly would be too hard. So what you're seeing in that binary blob is not the native assembly language. It's assembly language that was created by the compiler and then turned into assembly language, because that's the level that the architecture needs to know. Of course, you have microcode and stuff below that, but we're not going to get into that. So depending on the language that was used to create that code, Ghidra will actually show you like a sort of C-like higher level language implementation. And then you can start figuring out like, okay, how does the system work? Is there some sort of security going on? Is there a password checking? Sort of like if you ever cracked software back in the day and it was doing a key check or something like that. A lot of electronic systems are still doing stuff like that today. Another one is IDA Pro, which is not free. So Ghidra is free, open source, and people have looked through it, and it doesn't seem like there's any malicious stuff put in there by the NSA, but you never know. And IDA Pro is the other one. So that one is for money. Also very powerful, supports lots of different architectures, but it really depends. Like somebody had asked what architectures I like working with, or what's the coolest thing I did with Raspberry Pi. You know, if I'm using a Raspberry Pi, I might be writing shell scripts because I'm in Linux, and it's much more abstracted. But the problem is, like, if I want to control an I/O pin in Linux, or if I want to have some timing sensitive data output to communicate with some system, it's way harder to do that with a Raspberry Pi. You might be able to do it with a Pico, because that's actually more microcontroller based. So it depends on, like, if you need real precise control, you're not going to do that with a higher level abstracted language. But yeah, shell scripts, you know, a lot of Python. A lot of tools nowadays also are Python based. So hardware tools like the Chip Whisperer, which is what I used for the wallet hacking project to do fault injection. Thomas Roth, Stack Smashing, has a device called the Pico Debug and Dump, which is a Raspberry Pi Pico based system that I think is all Python based. So you can write Python to control the hardware that's then going to give you the low level control that you need. But yeah, I mean, there's so many ways to go, but I think languages, I've just always liked C. And I've dabbled in other ones if I need to, you know, if like you're hacking on something and you need to like look through Java code or whatever, like you can do it. So I think it's like, it just depends with everything. It just depends on what you're starting with and what you're interested in working on. And then you just learn that language first. Oh, here's one from Jason. Hey, Joe, good to see you. Met you back in the day through Terry Sandin. Cool. Yeah, so Terry was one of the guys in Prototype This. There's Terry. He was an amazing machinist, special effects creator out of Hollywood. So yeah, hi, that's awesome. Cool that you're here. What a collection of people. I love it. This is amazing. Okay. Well, I think I need to have a drink. I am not sponsored by Club Mate, but I would love to be. This is the hacker drink of choice. It is yerba mate tea, and this is manufactured in Germany. And the first time I tried it, I thought it was disgusting. I was in the Netherlands, jet lagged, and a friend of mine was like, have some Club Mate. And I did, and it tasted like an ashtray, but it's an acquired taste, and now I love it, and it's so good. It's like, I'm really sensitive to caffeine, and I basically had this much since the live stream started, and you can tell like I'm still wired. But yeah, highly recommended. There's not a lot of distributors. There's one distributor I think in the US, but if you're in Europe, yeah, highly recommended. And other places in the world, you might be able to find a distributor. So it's sort of like in the video, you know, I'd said pizza, food of hackers or whatever. And this is like the drink of hackers. Marcelo, mate from Germany. We drink a lot of mate. Yeah, cheers. Okay, let's see. Here's one. Things are getting more and more locked down. Encrypted firmware, secure elements, DRM. Should hardware hackers become a counterpower to enable people to monitor and audit the devices in their life? Yeah, that's a good point. So we are starting to see more systems become more secure. For the past 15 years or so that I've been teaching, and even growing up, a lot of these, and I'd mentioned this before, a lot of these same classes of attacks, UART, debug, engineers storing critical information in memory in wrong ways that can be accessed, like we did with the Trezor wallet. But little by little, we're starting to see engineers becoming more familiar with security and starting to implement more security-related things. So, when you deal with a system, say, I'm going to pick on Trezor again, not because I have anything against them. I actually think they're doing a great job, but because I have one here. So, Trezor hardware wallet. You've seen the video, you're familiar with it. They use a general purpose STM32 microcontroller. This is one that's used for billions of devices all over the world for lots of embedded systems, but it's not designed as a secure chip. So yes, there is security, but as we know, it can be bypassed in relatively easy way. I'm not going to say easy because it took a long time, and it's still, every time you do it, something could go wrong. But it implements very basic security mechanisms, and the vendors who do that, any microcontroller that's going to have code protection is going to be like, well, code protection is there for your convenience, but we take no responsibility if anything happens, if anybody gets your firmware, gets your data. So it's just very preliminary security, but in general, they're basically just general purpose, open, easy to use. And the reason Trezor is using them, which I found out by talking with them after I disclosed my work that I was doing, which they're not super happy about, is they want to have an open source product that everything that they want to be as open as possible, right? So their code is open source. You can look through it. Their hardware design is open source. When you start dealing with vendors that are making secure chips, secure elements like the ledger, which I'll mention in a second, those companies require you to sign non-disclosure agreements, confidentiality agreements. So as an engineer, if I'm designing a system that I want to be open and I want to share everything I can't be bound to a confidentiality agreement or to a non-disclosure type of agreement. And that's why Trezor takes that side of like, okay, we know we're not using a specifically secure microcontroller, but we're going to take that risk on the trade-off of being able to be as open and transparent as possible, as opposed to a vendor like Ledger, who has the Nano S and then Nano X. I saw a comment go past of like, have we hacked that yet? No, we're kind of looking into it. That's a little trickier because they have a general purpose microcontroller as their front end user interface, which could be compromised and through a supply chain style attack in advance before somebody gets hacked. And we've seen that stuff publicized. But they use a secure element from ST Microelectronics. It's an ST31. And that's a device that's specifically designed for secure data storage. So from a secure design perspective, like that's a much better approach. From an open perspective, not so much, because they can't talk about it. I've heard rumors of people that have found vulnerabilities in those chips, but they can't publicize it because they're legally protected. If somebody like me finds a problem in it, who hasn't signed a non-disclosure, I would more likely than not release that information, right? So that could cause a little bit of a stir. But from a design perspective, there are becoming more chips available that have secure features, and a lot of those do require the non-disclosure aspect of it. But on one hand, like sometimes people don't care. They would rather sign the NDA and use a device that they know is going to be secure. And we're starting to see that more and more. But getting back to the question, it's like engineers are not really trained in security. And it's something, and I know this because I was trained as an engineer and I worked in engineering companies before the Loft and at Stake. And it's something that even if engineers are aware of security, it's still really hard to do that stuff properly. So I've kind of said, like, it's up to the vendor to start creating chips that have more security features so the engineer doesn't need to understand that low-level functionality of security. Say even like doing encryption is really hard. And if you have your key storage done properly or your If the algorithm is done in a way that could be analyzed through side channel power analysis, to figure out power consumption to extract the encryption key. Like if that stuff is not handled by the vendor, you can't expect engineers to understand all of these attack risks. Like it's just, they're two separate industries, right? Engineers and hacking or infosec, like they're too separate to expect engineers to know that stuff. So until vendors start making those things more secure, where it just kind of happens under the hood, then we're still going to have vulnerable systems, even systems that are using secure devices, ARM trust zone and things like that have been found to have vulnerabilities and weaknesses, but they're way harder and way more complicated. So yeah, I mean, as systems start getting more locked down, and we're already starting to see, UART interfaces being shut down, debug interfaces being shut down, circuit boards not being as verbose as far as like silk screen markings and test points and things that we normally take advantage of. It makes hacking things harder. And hacking really, security really comes down to like how much effort and money does it take to hack the product that you're hacking. So say somebody comes to me with a ledger and they say, I have, $50,000 on the ledger and I don't remember my PIN. Can you hack the secure element? I sit back and think, okay, I know those things are designed to be secure. That secure element is probably going to need chip level access. So decapping the chip, getting to the silicon die inside, using a scanning electron microscope or focused ion beam machine, probably focused ion beam to reroute some of the mesh, maybe if there's a mesh layer of security, getting to the chip. And and because it's a secure element, they've thought of all of these attacks also. So I'm thinking that's going to require very specific skills that are probably going to cost me much more than $50,000 to complete, to do it. So that means security is great. When it comes to the point of something being easy enough to do or affordable enough to do to make it worthwhile, that's when security starts falling. So I think we're going to see a time where more devices are going to start using secure elements or secure microcontrollers. And there's going to be this time where we as hardware hackers are going to have a much harder time hacking those. And then eventually we will get to the point where somebody finds an attack or we find the resources that are going to make it easier to attack those. So it's definitely like this, kind of roller coaster, cyclical cat and mouse game. Let's see. Okay. How do I secure my home network? From Brian. And yeah, somebody says, good question, probably not secure to answer. Yeah, I do secure my home network, as you should as well. I'll leave it at that, right? It's like, you don't want to spill too much information about that. Whew, okay, so many questions. How you guys doing? Doing good? I am. I could do this all day, which I'm not going to. We'll probably stop soon, and then we'll, maybe come back for another one, because I know there are so many questions. I think what we're going to have to do is go through the list, go through the chat, go through still a lot of the papers that I have, put together a new list, do it again. Maybe by then we'll have another video out. Who knows? But let me just look through some of these and see. Oh yeah, there was one question that David had emailed me about. He said he found a vulnerability through ethical hacking. So he had found this vulnerability on his own, but the vendor isn't responding to my discovery. This is something that we dealt with a lot back at the Loft, because vendors, we'd find a problem and they'd be like, nobody's ever going to do that. Like, you guys are annoying, go away. Nobody's ever going to hack our system. And it took a lot of pressure, because we would be like, all right, if you don't, acknowledge our problem, we're going to release it to the public and we'll tell the press about it and, write our advisory, post it on mailing lists. And then after doing that a couple times, they're like, oh, okay, maybe we should pay attention. There are still a lot of companies these days, software companies, web companies, and hardware companies. I find this problem mostly with hardware companies, not as much in software, but it still happens that they don't want to hear about security problems, right? You find a problem, they're basically like, la, 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 la. We don't want to hear it. You're kind of calling their baby ugly. And I know how that feels as an engineer when somebody's like, your product sucks, or I found a security vulnerability in your thing. Like, it's a hard thing to handle. And I think a lot of vendors don't want to acknowledge that they have a problem, but it really is their responsibility to do it. So yeah, this person had found a vulnerability in a website and couldn't find the right person to talk to, because like customer service is not going to care. You have to see if there's like a security at whatever mailing list or email address that you can contact. Sometimes there actually is on a website, if you can find it, security resources, like where to submit your vulnerability. Again, I'll mention Trezor just because we broke their device. Trezor.io/security goes through their vulnerabilities, tells you how to submit a vulnerability. There is a place called HackerOne, which contracts with a lot of companies to help do their bug bounties or their bug acknowledgement, vulnerability acknowledgement types of stuff. They also have a list of even companies that they don't work with, but they have a list of like the security contact at all these different companies. So if you find a vulnerability and you want to submit, you can try to go look in that database and see if you can go that way to find the right person. One of the things that is still a problem, though, is like a lot of vendors, you find a problem and they're just going to be like, if you release that publicly, we're going to sue you. And then you have to take that choice of like, okay, do I want to take that risk? Do I want to publicize what I found at the risk of getting sued? And a lot of times companies will use that because they have lawyers on staff and they will just crush you if they can just threaten you and that's enough. But they could really crush you in court, even if you're on the right, even if you're doing the right thing. So that can be a problem. It hasn't happened to me recently. The last time I got threatened was when I was working at Stake. So the company that I'd helped start, we had lawyers, and a company got upset that I'd hacked their authentication tokens, their USB, authentication tokens. Before there were encrypted thumb drives, it was similar to that. And they got really upset, and we basically just told them to, screw off. I'm going to give the presentation anyway, and we did. But we've seen lots of stories of people getting squelched or threatened or arrested or pulled from conferences and all of this stuff. And it's just unfortunate, right? Because like, I feel like as hackers, we're doing the right thing. There's probably a lot of people, and we've always said this at the Loft, and I still say this now, is like, those of us that are doing this stuff publicly and sharing information is one thing, but there are probably a lot of people that are doing this stuff and not sharing information and using it for some malicious purpose or putting other people at risk. So vendors really should be like, hey, thanks for telling us. Like, yes, it hurts my feelings that we have a problem in the product, but thanks for sharing, because now we can fix it and acknowledge that and look better. And anytime a company tries to prevent information from getting released or not accept responsibility, like, I think they just look shitty in the end. Okay, let's see. Here's one. Fabio, what's your take on trail running? Do you use it for detaching and not thinking about computers, or do you find it as a source for new ideas? Yes. So I talked about having some balance in hacking through music and running and meditation. But yeah, trail running is awesome. It's funny because I grew up in the city, so most of my running has been just running on concrete and dodging cars and dodging people and like making an obstacle course out of it. But when I moved to Oregon, I started doing trail running, and yeah, I mean it's amazing to go out and experience some environment wherever it is. Whenever I travel around the world, I try to find trails to go into and explore. But it's a great way to kind of just disconnect from the technology world and think about things. Sometimes ideas will pop up in my head when I'm doing that. I find most of the ideas pop up like when I'm in the shower. So I don't know if it's like the white noise or something, but that's when ideas pop up, and then I run out, dripping wet naked, writing down ideas and answers to problems that I need to solve and stuff. But yeah, trail running has been a really good balance. I did end up, for those of you, I think somebody made a comment about the pizza compass that I had made last year. And that was a video I filmed for Wired of basically a device that you push a button and anywhere in the world it's going to show, figure out where the nearest pizza place is. And then you can kind of follow the compass. And that was a project that I'd made. I'd actually broken my foot on a trail and stuck in the house doing nothing. And then that project came about. So it gave me something to do while I had a broken foot, which took almost a year to heal. So that was horrendous. It took a long time to get back to feeling like I was at least somewhat healthy again. Okay, here's one. Big Boy 69. I love that name. How do I land a job with cybersecurity? I have experience as both a black hat and white hat, but don't have the official credentials. Any place I apply, don't take me seriously enough. Yeah, and that's a problem. I talked about this earlier of like having your, kind of work that you do publicly that you can share with people and show that, and then having a college degree I feel like, even though it's not required, a lot of people still in cybersecurity, executives or management or whatever, still kind of require that. And if you don't have that, or if you don't have the right skills, or you don't have the right certifications, like sometimes companies, they just have this list of requirements that's just totally unreasonable. And basically people just can't meet those. But I would say like, just keep trying and find, like, basically you don't want to work for a place that's not going to acknowledge and accept, what your value is, right? Like if you can't prove exactly what they're looking for, you don't want to work there anyway, because they're probably just going to make your life miserable. What you want to find, hopefully, if you can, and this is easier said than done, is somebody that does say, oh, cool, okay, you were doing black hat. Like, what were you doing? Show me some examples of your stuff. Even if it was, maybe not totally legit, legal, whatever, it shows you have those skills. And you'll probably have to prove to them, like, okay, I'm legit now. But it's like, you really want to find people that respect your skills and respect you and what you're doing, and look at you as a person and what you've done, not necessarily just what credentials you have. And, I mean, it's hard for me to say because I haven't interviewed for a job in forever. But I think it's just a matter of time until you find the right people that acknowledge, like, okay, it looks like what you've done, maybe was bad, but you have good skills. The stuff you've done is, in public is good, and go from there. So I think it's more their problem. It's not your problem, right? It's their fault that they're not acknowledging that. So yeah, just keep looking, and hopefully you'll find something. As far as job searches too, people have asked me this. I don't really have good insight into, what sites to use for searching for jobs and stuff, but I will say, like, InfoSec Twitter. So if you go on Twitter, I don't really know how many people use like hashtag InfoSec. But if you can find people that are in the InfoSec world, maybe find people that are following me. They work at companies that maybe are like, hey, we're looking for certain types of people. Also at conferences a lot of times around the world, whether they're big or small, black hat or small, community ones, there's usually companies that are there as recruiting or something. And maybe you can talk to them and, hook up with them in person and see if that works. Brian says, what do you think is better, specialize in one thing or know many things but without deep knowledge? Great. Yeah, that's a great question. I would say a little bit of both. It's something where you can't specialize in everything, right? Like hacking in general is just so massive now that there's so many different areas, like you can't specialize in everything. But knowing a little bit of everything, I think, is important, because a lot of times you're going to see a product that might be a hardware product connect to a network. So you might need to know, even if you're doing hardware hacking, you might need to know basic network implementation, or what tools can you use to sniff a network? How does a network work? And then network communicates to some web app or some phone app, right? So it's like learning a little bit of software reverse engineering, or web app, poking around with web database stuff, scripting and all of that. So I think it's somewhere in the middle. I think you want to kind of at least know what's out there, but then specialize in the thing that you love to do. And like with hardware, it's the same thing. Like I know what I'm good at with hardware, which is, board level types of manipulation, firmware level manipulation. But for chip level, I don't have a focused ion beam machine. I think it's cool. I think, like, if I had a good microscope and I could decap chips and look at it, I think that'd be awesome. But I know what people can do, and I know that people have other, skills to do chip level. So I would then, either outsource to them or work with them to use their equipment, or maybe go to a hackerspace or, a university that has that equipment and have somebody help me. So I think as long as you know enough about all the different areas, and then focus on what you like to do, that's my answer. Jet says, finally, Brian got his turn. Sorry. I mean, there's so many, and I'm not scrolling back either. So if there's stuff I missed, again, we're going to go through all of this and hopefully hold another one. Yeah. So here's a question. What does black hat mean? Gray hat, white hat? Anonymous has tried to answer that. So this is a great question. So, my perspective of being a hacker is this very, maybe a naive view of what a hacker is. And that's probably because I grew up in this world, and I grew up believing this, of like a hacker as being somebody that, loves technology, understands how technology works, is able to make technology do things in a way it's not intended to do. And then really later on it came, kind of teaching people about that and sharing that knowledge and bending technology to your will, right? Or creating technology that other people can't. When we were at the Loft and started to talk about hackers with the media and explaining like, look, we're people that like to break systems and break into systems and do this stuff, but not from a malicious purpose, though we all did that when we were younger. We had to try to differentiate the term hacker because the media at the time was using hacker as only malicious, right? Attackers, people that would break into stuff, cybercrime, financial based, all of that. And we were trying to maintain that term of like, no, hackers are good also, hackers are good people too. So we had to come up with this differentiator of like, how do we explain that we're hackers in a way that is different than what they're portraying hackers to be. And I don't know if we're the first people to do this, but we're very early in that stage of defining good guy and bad guy as black hat and white hat. And that was based on like old cowboy movies that were, black hats were the guys in the masks and, robbing the banks. And then white hats were the heroes that would come and save things. So it kind of made sense as like white hat, good guy, black hat, bad guy. But of course, nothing is ever black and white, right? Because the laws might say that you're a black hat, but you might identify as a white hat because what you're doing, you might not think should be illegal. So we termed this coin gray hat, kind of in the middle, like we're kind of on the fence, right? Between gray hat or between black hat and white hat. Maybe doing controversial things that companies might not like or governments might not like, but how we feel is still good. Because a lot of times you have to push that boundary. Like if you just conform to the white hat requirement, say you're doing a bug bounty and it's just, you only do the things that they've scoped, that's great, but it doesn't give you the freedom to kind of, go outside of that. So we tried to use that gray hat term to say like, yeah, we're maybe doing controversial things, probably not illegal, but we're definitely not just pure, just a white hat straight out of school doing only what you say, because we all came from that, different type of mindset. So I hope that answers that. Okay. What else? Let's see. Maybe we'll do just like, what are we at? We're at like an hour and a half. Okay. How are you guys doing? Please break Dymo's printer label DRM. Yeah, there's so many crazy like DRM schemes now for products, and it's so annoying, right? We see, I don't know specifically about Dymo, but inkjet printers, 3D printers. What is it? There was like Juicero, that stupid juice company that you had to buy their juice packets, and only their system would only work with those juice packets because of some, I don't know if they had some secure element or some authentication going on. But yeah, the DRM thing is definitely, that's a scary thing. And back when, someone asked me about the metaverse and what I think about technology, basically, that's the exact reason, the incorrect use of technology, right? Of like preventing us as users of owning the stuff that we're using. So I guess Dymo maybe is a big one, but yeah, DRM is horrible. And if I don't hack that stuff, hopefully other people hack that for sure. Okay. I think that I am going to wrap it up. I love it. I wish that we could just do this all day. So many great questions, and I just love that you guys are communicating with each other. I've seen a couple blocked comments here, so whatever those are, I don't know because I didn't see them. But I mean, this is such a great chat. I love it. I'm glad you're all talking with each other too. I'm sorry that I'm not able to get to every single question, but again, I am going to go back through the questions that people have emailed me. We're going to go through the chat, and yeah, we're definitely going to do this again, right? Someone gives me a thumbs up or something to at least know, like, should we do this again? Yeah, oh yes. Is this video going to be saved? Yeah, so this is going to be saved. I think as soon as I end the stream, it is going to come up as a video on my channel, and the chat is also going to be saved as well. How about a drawing for next training session? Oh, that's an interesting perspective. like I mentioned, the one problem with the training classes is it's run by other people, and then I show up and teach the class. But yeah, that might be something we could do. Maybe next time we do a live stream, like, you know, with a giveaway for something like that, or like, yeah, one-on-one Zoom hardware hacking meeting or something like that. Yeah, who knows? This is awesome. Look at all this. Hell yeah. Please do this again. I love it. Do it as much as possible. Okay. So yeah, we'll figure it out. I'm doing it a little bit of traveling for the next little while, and working on some projects, filming some stuff. So maybe we'll do another before the next video comes out, or maybe we'll do one after. We'll see. But yeah, definitely stay tuned for that. I appreciate it. Thank you very much, all of you, for listening. Thanks for your support for this awesome YouTube plaque. It's awesome seeing some of you guys on here that I've met before. It's just, yeah, I mean, I'm just blown away, right? I'm blown away that all of you have sat here and actually listened to me for an hour and a half. But that all of you are talking, and it really is this great community that's out there. And like, this is what it's all about, right? Of like doing this stuff and sharing with people. So yeah, we'll do more questions next time. You can reach out to me again through Grand Idea Studio or offspec.io. Send questions that way. So I'll put them in the list. Come back for the next chat. Let's do it again. And that's it. So thank you again. Joe Grand, out.